Welcome back to True Crime for Sleep. If you've got a thought on this case, leave a comment, and if you want more, like and subscribe. Now, you're heading underground to Hatton Garden after a long Easter weekend when London is half asleep. It's early morning, and the first thing you notice is not what you see, it's what you don't hear. No normal bustle, no clatter of keys, just a thick silence hanging in a basement corridor. Then your torch finds it, a raw, freshly cut hole punched through reinforced concrete into the vault. The dust is still there, the jagged edge is still sharp, and the safe deposit boxes are suddenly just boxes. You log every entry, tape every boundary, and start thinking like someone who had hours, not minutes. Because this wasn't a smash and grab, it was a job with a timetable, tool marks, and a response gap someone counted on. So what exactly failed first? The alarms, the assumptions, or the way the timeline was checked? You step closer and the air changes, gritty and mineral, like you have bitten down on chalk. You expect the usual chaos of burglary, scattered papers, frantic rummaging, noise. But this is surgical, and that is what makes your skin tighten. The wall is not shattered. It is worked, chewed through in neat, ugly layers. Congratulations, you are looking at patience, not panic. A uniformed officer behind you whispers the obvious, that it must have taken hours. You don't answer because the hole already told you that. You angle your torch, and the beam catches deep grooves where a core drill bit again. Tool marks, like fingerprints, only louder. You call for the scenes of crime team, and you hear your own voice do that calm, professional thing. That tone that says, "This is routine," even when it is not. Then comes the first escalation, the one that turns this from a strange burglary into a city problem. The security manager is pale and keeps repeating a sentence like, "It might change if he says it differently." Over the weekend, there was an alarm, a vibration alarm late Thursday night, just after closing. It signaled in, it logged, and it was marked as a fault. It was not treated like men cutting concrete, because nobody imagines men cutting concrete. Your torch dips toward the floor, and you see fine dust tracked into a faint shoe print. Not a dramatic boot print in mud, just a whisper of tread in powder. That is a gift, and also a warning. If you start moving people around in here, you erase it. So you make a decision right now, without ceremony. You freeze the room. You tighten the perimeter. You limit entry to names you can write down and shoes you can account for. Because the first crime scene mistake is always the same: too many helpful feet. You stand at the edge of the breach and look through. Inside the vault, the safe deposit boxes line the walls in tidy grids, like metal teeth. Some boxes are missing entirely. Some are hanging open empty, their little doors bent and sulking. And some are untouched, which is almost worse. It means the thieves were not ransacking, they were selecting. You feel the urge to ask how much is gone, but you already know the answer. Nobody knows yet. The losses are locked inside other people's secrets. Cash that never existed on paper. Diamonds that were supposed to outlive the people who hid them. Family heirlooms that do not have photographs because you do not photograph something you assume is safe. Above you, London is doing what it always does after a holiday. Commuters are coming back to life, coffee in hand, eyes half shut. Down here, you're counting empty boxes, and you can almost hear the media warming up, licking their chops for a tidy story, a daring gang, a movie-style caper. But you have worked enough burglaries to know the truth. Real crime is not elegant. It is logistics and risk management, and somebody doing math on a calendar. You walk back out into the basement corridor and ask for the building's access logs. You want key fob records, door contacts, alarm activation times, everything. Because if they had hours, then someone gave them time. Either the schedule did, or a person did, or the system did. And you don't get a hole like that without knowing what you can get away with. A technician arrives, blinking, holding printouts like they are flimsy shields. He shows you the alarm report from Thursday night. There is a timestamp, late evening, and a note, vibration alert, zone something, followed by reset. Then nothing. No police response, no guard sent down. No one walked the basement that night. It was logged as a fault because the system had a history of faults. Congratulations, you have just met the killer cousin of routine complacency, a system that cries wolf often enough that you stop listening. You ask, who made the call to stand down? The technician shrugs and points up the chain. The monitoring company, the security contractor, the building manager, everyone has a slice of the decision. And nobody wants the whole thing. That is how failures hide. In committee, you pivot back to the breach and let the forensic photographer get in close. Flash, click, scale marker, more click. You make them take the long shots and the tight shots, because later, in court, somebody will say, the hole could have been made by anyone. And you will need to show, no, not anyone. Someone with the right drill, the right bits, the right nerve, and the right time. The scenes of crime officer starts dusting for prints, but you already feel how unlikely that is. Concrete dust is abrasive. Metal edges are smeared. Gloves are cheap. But thieves, even clever ones, are still human. And humans leak. They leave hair, skin cells, fibers, little offerings to the gods of bad luck. You order a sweep for trace evidence around the corridor, not just the vault, not just the hole, anywhere a shoulder brushed a wall, anywhere a bag might have scraped paint, because the vault is the headline and the corridor is the story. You ask for the building's closed-circuit camera coverage. You are told what you expected and still hate hearing. Some cameras cover the street, some cover the lobby. But down here, in the basement, approaches coverage is limited. And over the holiday weekend, no one was watching live. Recordings exist, but they are on a loop, and you need them now. So you send an officer to seize the system, hard drives and all. Not later. Now. Because the first thing a clever offender does after a job is try to clean the trail. The second thing is hope you are too slow. While that is happening, you meet the people who own the boxes. Or rather, you meet the idea of them through a manager who already looks exhausted. He explains, haltingly, that there are hundreds of box holders. Some are jewelers, some are dealers, some are private clients, and some are people you will never see because they will not come forward. You can feel the scale spreading like ink in water. This is not a single victim with a single missing watch. This is a vault in the center of London's Diamond District. And if the thieves took stones, those stones can be cut, recut, mounted, sold. A diamond is a memory that can be reshaped. Cash is worse. Cash is a ghost the moment it leaves the room. You tell the manager to start compiling a list of box holders. You tell him to prepare for the kind of week that makes people quit jobs. The calls, the accusations, the grief that turns into anger. And then you do the part that feels boring but wins cases. You rewind time. You open a notebook and start building the weekend, minute by minute. Thursday night, alarm. Friday, holiday limited staff. Saturday, quiet. Sunday, quiet. Monday, holiday, quiet. Tuesday morning, discovery. That is the timeline the thieves loved. A long stretch of predictable absence, like an empty road, with no traffic cameras. You request every call log connected to the alarm activation. The monitoring company records. The contractor notes the time someone acknowledged the signal. The time someone chose not to, because the burglar did not just exploit a building. He exploited human behavior. The assumption that nothing serious happens over a holiday. The assumption that faults are faults, not forewarnings. The assumption that nobody would dare. You go back to the hole and stare again, this time with a colder eye. If they hit Thursday night, that might not be the full job. That might be a test, a tap on the glass to see if anyone comes running. And if nobody comes, then the job becomes possible. That realization is a new development, and you can feel it shift your posture. You are not hunting a single break-in. You are hunting a sequence, an attempt, a response, a return. That means confidence. That means a crew comfortable enough to come back. And people who come back tend to have habits, routes, and faces that cameras can catch. So you widen the circle. You send officers to canvass every business with a camera. Jewelry shops, takeaway counters, parking garages, office lobbies, anywhere that might have captured a van creeping by, or men carrying heavy bags. You request traffic camera footage from routes in and out of central London. Because a core drill and masonry equipment is not something you tuck under a coat. It comes in cases, it comes in tool bags, it comes with the posture of men pretending they belong. And belonging is easier when you wear a high visibility vest and walk like you are late for work. By midday, you are sitting in a cramped office with screens showing grainy video. The kind of video that makes everyone squint and argue. You watch the street outside Hatton Garden. You watch time scroll by and by and by. Most of it is nothing. A taxi, a fox at 3 a.m, a couple walking too close together, laughing. But then you see it, a vehicle that should not be there at that time. A van, slow, cautious, pausing where it could see the building. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a van behaving like it has a purpose. You mark the time, you mark the angle, you mark the plate if you can, and you do not celebrate, because one van is not a case, but it is a thread. And threads are how you pull. Back at the scene, the toolmark analyst arrives. He gets down close to the breach, almost reverent. He traces the scoring with a gloved finger, then shakes his head slightly. This was not done with a hand drill. This was heavy kit, an industrial core drill, likely with a diamond-tipped bit. You laugh once, quietly, because the irony is perfect. They used diamond tools to steal diamonds. London loves symmetry. The analyst explains, in plain terms, that the scoring indicates controlled pressure, steady speed. Someone who knew not to burn out the bit, not to crack the wall wrong. You imagine the sound down there at night, a low grinding whine. You imagine how long it takes, hours, and again, you circle back to the same question. How did nobody hear? How did the offenders stay comfortable? A detective beside you offers the obvious, that maybe they knew the alarm response time. Maybe they knew the contractor would not come out over a holiday. Maybe they knew the building's routines. Insider knowledge. That phrase is always tempting. It is a neat explanation that makes the world feel less random. But you do not jump yet. You file it as a working theory, not a conclusion. Because blaming an insider too early makes you lazy. And lazy is how cases die. Still, the suspicion changes what you ask for. You request staff lists, maintenance schedules, who had access codes, who had keys, who knew the vault's layout, who knew the walls were thick but not thick enough. And you request something else, something unglamorous. You want the records of complaints about the alarm? Every time it falsely triggered, every time it was reset, every time someone rolled their eyes and called it a nuisance. Because if the alarm had a reputation, the thieves could have learned it, or tested it, or both. A new piece of information lands like a dull stone in your hand. The thieves did not come in through the front. They came in through a communal entrance and down into the basement. They forced doors, but not in a way that screamed panic. They did not destroy everything. They moved like they expected to have time, and that means they had done reconnaissance. They knew where cameras were. They knew where walls were. They knew what they could get away with. Outside, reporters gather, because they always do. The story has everything they like: diamonds, London, an Easter weekend, a hole in a vault wall, like something from a cartoon. You keep them back, you keep your face blank. You say as little as possible, because every detail you give away becomes a checklist for the offenders, and offenders love free information. Meanwhile, the box holders begin arriving, not all at once. First, the business owners, tight-faced, whispering into phones. Then, private clients, older, anxious, clutching handbags like shields. You watch them from a distance, and you feel that familiar procedural bitterness. This is the part nobody sees in the heist fantasies. The slow unfolding harm. A jeweler who stored stock for a busy season. A family who stored rings and documents. Someone who kept cash because they do not trust banks. Everyone thought this place was boringly safe. Now they are staring at you like you personally failed them. In the afternoon, you get your first real setback. The alarm monitoring company's account is muddy. They say the signal came in? Yes. They say it was treated as a fault? Yes. But the exact reasons, who acknowledged it, who called whom, it is all softened by procedure. There, I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. There is always a way for responsibility to evaporate when enough people touch a decision. You can feel it happening in real time, like fog rolling in under a door. So you do what you always do. When the story starts getting polite, you stop asking for explanations and you start asking for documents. You want the raw signal logs, the operator notes, the call recordings, and the escalation policy in writing. You want names attached to timestamps because excuses hate handwriting, and while the paperwork crawls out of filing cabinets, you keep the pressure where it belongs, on the timeline, on the doors, on the little choices that added up to a hole in a wall. You step back into the corridor again, and you listen, not for ghosts, but for geometry. Concrete remembers tools. Metal remembers force. A door remembers which way it was hit and how hard. The entry route is a story, and criminals always leave the punctuation marks. You check the communal entrance. You look at the frame, the lock, the strike plate, not because you think it will be dramatic, because you know it will be mundane. A pry point, a screwdriver scar, a latch that gave way with a tired little sigh after years of being overconfident. Congratulations, you are staring at the exact moment security became theater. And theater is great, right up until the audience starts stealing the props. You follow the route down, step by step, like you are walking in their boots. You imagine the weight of the drill, the bags, the batteries, the extension leads. You imagine the way their shoulders would brush the wall at the turn. You imagine the pause they take every time they listen for footsteps above, because even the boldest thief has a pulse. You have the scenes of crime team working behind you, slow and methodical, like monks with evidence bags, tape lifts, swabs, rulers beside tool marks, photographs that look boring until you are sitting in court months later begging 12 strangers to care about a scrape. A technician says the vault wall is reinforced concrete, thick and supposedly resistant. You nod because supposedly is not a material. Supposedly is what people say to sleep at night. You ask about the building plans. You want to know what the wall should have been. On paper, you want to know what it was. In reality, because sometimes old buildings have surprises, renovations, service conduits, a patch of thinner pour behind a cable run, a compromise made by a contractor who wanted to get home early. And thieves love compromises. They love them the way rats love gaps. The plans come in a dusty folder, the kind that smells like old glue and stale cigarettes. You spread them on a table under fluorescent lights. The lines look neat. The thickness is specified. The vault is drawn like a fortress. But drawings do not stop drills. People stop drills. Or alarms do. Or a tired operator on a holiday weekend who decides a vibration signal is just another tantrum. You mark the location of the breach on the plan. It is not random. It is not a wild guess. It is exactly where you would cut if you had studied the wall and chosen the fastest path. Not through the door, not through the locks, through the side where pride lives and sensors get lazy. You call for a structural engineer, someone who can tell you if that section had a weakness. Because if the wall was thinner there, that is not just a clue. It is motive. It means somebody knew, or somebody measured, or somebody learned the way burglars learn, by looking, by tapping, by listening, by coming back. Back in the office upstairs, the media noise is growing teeth. You can hear it through the building, even when you cannot see it. Phones ringing, people whispering, someone laughing in the wrong place because fear makes people stupid. The story is already being written without you. It is being dressed up as genius. It is being polished into a caper. You do not have time for capers. You have a crime scene full of dust and a city full of jewelers who are about to start doing mathematics with grief. You take a call from someone higher up, and you can tell by their tone what they want. A suspect, a name, something you can hold up to the cameras like a trophy. You give them the only honest answer. Not yet. Not until the evidence stops being interesting and starts being admissible. Because you can be right and still lose if you are sloppy, and you are not going to give these thieves the satisfaction of a technicality. So you keep rewinding. You pull the access control data, key fob swipes, door openings, alarms set and unset times. The building itself has a memory, even if people pretend it does not. You find the expected pattern, business hours, routine entries, cleaners, maintenance, and then you find the holiday gap. Long, quiet, the kind of silence criminals pay attention to. You look for any swipes in the wrong hours, any anomalies. You find some. A late swipe that should not be there. A door contact triggered at a time no one admits to being present. It could be a fault. It could be a cleaner. It could be the thieves. Congratulations. You are now living in the land of maybes. You need to turn maybes into facts. You start calling building staff. Not accusing. Not yet. Just asking them to remember. Where were you Thursday night? Who locked up? Who saw what? And as usual, memory behaves like a liar. People remember feelings, not details. They remember being tired. They remember wanting to go home. They remember the holiday beginning like a relief. And then you ask about the alarm, and they start remembering less. Because the alarm is a responsibility, and responsibility makes people defensive. One supervisor says the system had been playing up for weeks. False triggers, minor faults, the monitoring company calling to report something, then resetting it. It becomes normal, and normal is the enemy of urgent. You ask how many times police were called out for false alarms. You ask how many times contractors attended and found nothing. You ask how many times someone said, "Next time, do not bother." And you watch the supervisor's eyes drift because they know what you are building, a narrative that ends with a man holding a drill. Because everyone else stopped paying attention. You send someone to the monitoring company in person, not on the phone, in person. You want the server pulled. You want the operator roster. You want the call recordings secured before they get lost in retention schedules? Retention schedules are just forgetting with paperwork. While that is happening, you push the camera work harder. You are not just looking at the street outside. You are looking at routes, junctions, loading bays, nearby car parks. And you are looking for repetition. A vehicle that appears Thursday night and again Friday. A man in a hat who walks past twice. A van that idles like it is listening. The footage is grainy and cruel. It gives you just enough to hate it. You freeze frames. You zoom in until pixels become abstract art. You enhance until the image looks like it has been painted with wet sand. But you keep going because sometimes the "I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request" pixel hides a gift in the ugliest way. By being just clear enough to be useful, you start matching shadows instead of faces. You watch wheel arches, dents, roof racks, the way a sliding door sticks for half a second. You look for a van that moves like it is heavy, slow off the line, cautious over speed bumps. And when you finally catch one doing the same lazy loop twice, you circle it like a shark. You send the timestamp to the traffic camera unit. You ask them for every automatic plate read in a tight radius for that night and the next one too. Because if the crew returned, the road network remembers them, even when they think it does not. The first plate read comes back with the energy of a shrug. It is either misread or partially obscured or both. Congratulations, you have met the tiny miracle criminals rely on, a dirty plate and a cheap angle. So you do not chase the number, you chase the pattern. You request all similar vans in the footage. You build a list of possibles and you start crossing them off the hard way. One is a courier, logged, tracked, dull as dishwater. One belongs to a plumber who can prove he was on a call-out. One is a hire van, and that one makes your jaw tighten. Hire vans are the anonymous masks of the working class, and also of thieves who want to look ordinary. You ask for rental records that match the date range. You ask for names, addresses, payment methods, and any note the clerk typed in a bored moment. Then you wait, because bureaucracy moves like a tired animal. Down in the vault, the structural engineer confirms something that feels like a punch and a relief at the same time. The breach point was not random. That section of wall was still reinforced, still serious, but it was the most sensible place to attack. A service void ran nearby, old construction decisions, and a slightly different pour. Not weak, not soft, just faster to cut if you know where to aim. So either the "I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request." The crew studied the building like a bored student cramming for an exam they planned to cheat on. And if they studied, they visited. And if they visited, they left something behind, even if it was only a digital shadow. You take that engineer's note and you pin it to the timeline like a threat. Fastest cut point. Service void nearby. Not magic, not genius, just homework. Congratulations, you are no longer chasing a fantasy crew in balaclavas. You are chasing the kind of men who bring measuring tape to a crime. You ask for every maintenance record tied to that wall. You want who accessed the service areas, who signed off works, who had reason to be there. Because there are two ways to learn a wall. You can read the plans, or you can open the wall for legitimate work and remember what you saw. You also ask for something that feels petty until it doesn't. You want the list of companies that have done drilling, cabling, plumbing, or security work in the last few years? Anyone who would have walked that basement corridor in high-vis without being questioned. Your brain is doing that tired detective thing, building a picture out of boring parts. Old building, old routines, holiday weekend, alarm that cried wolf, a wall that had a quicker spot, and men who moved like they had booked the place for the night. Now you make the first real pivot, the one that turns this from architecture to people. You stop staring at concrete and you start staring at phones, because nobody can resist carrying a little tracking device everywhere they go. Not even thieves who think they are legends. You walk into the analyst's room, where the air smells like overheated plastic and cold takeaway. Screens glow with maps and timestamps, cell sites, sectors, little slices of London where a phone whispers, "I am here. I am still here. I am moving." You request telecommunications data for the windows that matter Thursday night when the vibration alarm tripped. Friday night, when the district went dark, and then the long stretch when nothing should have moved down there except dust settling. You do not ask for one phone, you ask for patterns. Clusters, devices that show up in that tiny area at strange hours, then vanish for months. You are looking for the people who treated Easter like an opportunity, not a holiday. The first returns are not cinematic. They are lists. They are columns. They are numbers that mean nothing until you stare long enough to feel them become faces. You sort by the ones that go quiet during the heist window, burner phones that stop talking, handsets that power down, devices that suddenly behave like they have something to hide. Congratulations, you have found the modern equivalent of pulling a hood up. Except this hood leaves a record, too. A clean break in the chatter. The analyst flags a handful of devices that move into central London on the night in question. They arrive. They linger. They move away again in the early hours, like a tide going out. Not proof, but it is a shape, and shapes become warrants when you can name the edges. So you cross-reference. You run the devices against intelligence databases, known offenders, known associates, people with histories that read like a manual. Burglary, handling, conspiracy, the kind of files that are thick even when the sentences were short. A couple of hits come back, and the room temperature seems to drop a degree. Not because you are scared of them, because you understand them. These are not kids. These are not adrenaline tourists. These are older men, experienced, methodical, and still convinced the world owes them one last score. You look at the names and you feel that sour certainty settle in. Men like this do not retire. They just slow down. And slowing down makes them plan. There is one device in particular that keeps reappearing in the right windows. Not exactly inside the building, because cell site coverage is not that polite. But close enough that you could walk from the ping to the vault door in a minute or two. The subscriber details are either false or the kind of dead end you can buy at a corner shop, but the device has a history. It has touched other areas, other nights, other jobs. It has been near known burglary locations. It has been near known people. You do not need a name yet. You need a direction. So you build what the analysts call a chart and what you call a spider web. Device A links to device B through repeated co-location. Device B links to a home address because it is used casually outside the crime window, and that address links to a man with a history. The story is forming, not in a dramatic confession, but in the dull mathematics of habit. People can pretend they are careful. Their routines still betray them. You feed the emerging names into the vehicle thread, the van, the hire records, the grainy loop around Hatton Garden. You ask a simple question, the kind that sounds like nothing. Who in these circles has access to vans? Who rents? Who borrows? Who has been stopped before in commercial vehicles at odd hours? Because tools like that do not teleport. They ride. They rattle in the back. They leave scratches on cargo floors. The hire company responds, eventually, with the enthusiasm of a dental appointment. A white transit-style van was rented around the right period, paid with a card that leads to an address, and a name that looks clean until you look closer. The name belongs to a man with connections to the very crew your phone chart is sketching. Not directly, never directly. Criminals do not love paperwork in their own names. They love cousins, friends of friends, people who need money, and do not ask questions. Congratulations, you have found the human shield layer, not the burglars, but the people they leaned on. Now you do the unglamorous thing that makes cases. You start watching, not storming, not kicking doors, watching. Surveillance teams go out, quiet and patient, like fishermen who know the tide will bring the catch. They sit in cars that smell of old coffee and damp fabric. They swap number plates like socks. They write down who comes and goes, who carries bags, who visits storage units, who drives a van to an industrial estate and comes back light. You do not need them to do the crime again. You need them to be themselves. Because being yourself is where people get sloppy. You have names now, or at least strong contenders, and they are not glamorous. They are men with lived-in faces, men with creased hands, men who move carefully because their knees complain. The sort of men you could imagine complaining about the price of beer. And that is what makes them dangerous. They do not look like villains. They look like someone's uncle. One of them, you learn, has a reputation in the burglary world. Not a myth, just a known quantity. A man who has done time, who has taught others, who still believes he is smarter than the system. The system disagrees, but it takes a while to make its point. While surveillance runs, you keep tightening the evidence chain. You get the alarm company call recordings. You listen to them in a bland office, and you feel your jaw clench in that familiar way. An operator receives the vibration signal. They discuss it. They treat it as a likely fault. They follow a policy that was written by someone who never had to stand in a vault full of empty boxes. No police dispatched, no guard sent, just a reset and a note. It is not criminal. It is not malice. It is a small bureaucratic choice, and it becomes a door for thieves. You log it because later, when the defense tries to paint this as an unknown master crew, you will show how the crew was invited by indifference. Now you return to the physical evidence, because you need more than charts and feelings. You need to put suspects at the scene, and you need to put tools into their hands. Tool marks are one route. Concrete dust is another. You ask the lab to analyze the dust from the breach. Composition. Aggregate. Any unique signatures that could match residue on seized clothing or equipment later. It sounds like science fiction, but it is just geology with a badge. Concrete is not one thing, it is a recipe. And recipes leave crumbs. You also request a detailed CCTV timeline, not just the street, inside the building where possible. Entry points, corridors, the lobby, any camera that might catch movement at odd hours, even if it is only a shoulder, a flashlight beam, a door opening a fraction. The CCTV is patchy. It frustrates you, but patchy does not mean useless. It means you have to stitch. You stitch with timestamps, you stitch with external cameras, you stitch with traffic footage that catches the van at junctions, you stitch with cell data that shows devices moving in the same direction. By the end, you have something that almost feels like a story. A van arrives. Men enter. Hours pass. Men leave. The van departs. The city sleeps through it, because the city always sleeps through something. And then you hit the first real human mistake from the crew. Not the alarm, not the wall, not even the van. The mistake is ego. These men cannot resist talking to each other. They cannot resist meeting. They cannot resist the little rituals of planning and bragging, because isolation feels like fear. Surveillance sees them gather in familiar places. Garages, sheds, a workshop, places that smell of oil and cigarette smoke, places where men feel in control. And once you have a place, you have an opportunity. Now comes the part that separates a suspicion from a case. You go covert. You apply for authorizations that read like a novel written by lawyers. You justify every intrusion, every listening device, every tracked vehicle, because if you do this wrong, you do not just lose the case, you hand the defense a weapon. And you will not do that. The warrants come through and the operation shifts in tone. You are no longer waiting for a mistake. You are engineering a space where their mouths make one. You place listening devices where you can. A vehicle, a location, not everywhere, not perfectly. Covert work is never perfect. It is just better than guessing. You sit in a room with headphones, listening to other people's lives leak out in fragments. Mostly it is boredom. Mostly it is complaining. Then, like a bad smell, the job seeps into the conversation. It starts small. A reference to drilling, a gripe about equipment, a remark about how long it took, and then the kind of sentence that makes everyone in the room stop moving. Details that only the crew would know. The kind of detail that could not come from newspapers because you did not give it to newspapers. A mention of the vault, a mention of the boxes, a mention of frustration because something did not go as smoothly as they wanted. Congratulations, you can feel the case click tighter, but you do not rush. This is the trap investigators always fall into. The urge to pounce the moment you feel vindicated. You let them talk, you let them hang themselves slowly, because slow is what holds up in court. The conversations are not movie villain monologues. They are mundane. They talk about money the way you talk about rent. They complain about each other. They blame. They joke. They use nicknames, half-coded phrases, like children playing spies. But the substance is there. They discuss splitting the take. They discuss what was taken. They discuss what might have been missed. They discuss tools, batteries, drill bits. They discuss the whole, as if it is a personal achievement. In one recording, one of them mentions that the drill overheated. Another complains about the lift, the access, the awkwardness of moving gear. And you hear it, the first crack. They are not united. They are a project team held together by greed and nostalgia. Nostalgia for when they were younger and stronger and the world felt easier to rob. That nostalgia makes them careless. It makes them want to relive it aloud. Now, you begin mapping roles. Who sounds like the planner? Who sounds like the man with the hands? The one who actually drilled? Who is the worrier? Who is the loud one? Every crew has a loud one. The loud one is your friend, whether he knows it or not. You also listen for locations. Where are they meeting? Where are they storing things? What are the place names that slip out casually because men forget microphones exist? One conversation mentions a workshop. Another references a unit. a lockup. They do not give you an address. They do something better. They give you a habit, and habits are traceable. Surveillance teams follow the habit. They watch the suspect travel to an industrial area, the kind with shuttered units and weeds growing through cracked tarmac. He arrives. He unlocks. He stays inside for a while. He leaves. No visible bags. But then, later, another crew member visits the same place, and later, another. Congratulations, you have found the clubhouse. Now you have a problem. You can hit the unit now, get tools, maybe some loot, and take the crew off the street. Or you can wait and risk them moving everything, because criminals can feel pressure even when you think you are invisible. Covert work has a shelf life. People notice strange cars. They notice the same face in different hats. They feel the air change, and once they feel it, they scatter. So you do what investigations always do at this stage. You hold tension like a glass of water filled to the edge, not spilling, not setting it down, just carrying it carefully through a crowded room. You keep recording, you keep watching, and the crew keeps doing the one thing you can always count on. They keep talking. In another recorded conversation, you hear them argue about missing property. Not missing to the victims, missing to them. A bag they could not open. A box they could not get into. A section of the vault they did not have time for. The heist is already decaying into disappointment, because no haul is ever as clean as the fantasy. And then you hear something that makes you sit forward. One of them complains about leaving something behind. Not loot, something else, a tool, a piece of equipment, or maybe a trace. They are vague, but the anxiety is clear. That is the second crack, fear. And fear makes men do stupid things, like revisiting a scene or moving property at the worst time. You feed that into the team. If they think they left something, they may go back. If they go back, you can catch them in an act that is easier to prove than a past crime. So you put eyes on Hatton Garden again. Plain clothes, unmarked cars, quiet vigilance. You watch the street like it is a stage after the show ended, waiting to see if an actor returns for a forgotten prop. Days pass. Then, in one of the recordings, a line drops that changes the urgency. They mention getting rid of stones, not selling them in one dramatic deal, breaking them down, moving them through contacts, the slow laundering process that turns identifiable property into anonymous wealth. You can almost hear the evidence evaporating. That is the clock starting. Now, the investigation pivots from proving guilt to preserving recovery, because you can convict men and still fail victims if the loot is gone. You begin building warrants, not one, many. Homes, vehicles, outbuildings, units, garages. You write them with obsessive detail, because if you miss, you do not get a second clean chance. A wrong search tips them off. A sloppy search gets challenged. A rushed search loses context, so you list what you expect to find. Tools matching core drill marks, concrete dust, masonry bits, gloves, bags, cash, bundled, hidden, jewelry, loose stones, packaging, and you also list the mundane: receipts, petrol purchases, storage unit contracts, maps, notes, because criminals love writing things down, even when they pretend they do not. You coordinate with financial investigators too, because money moves, even when diamonds do not. A sudden car purchase, a debt paid, cash deposits that do not match income, new watches on old wrists. You cannot put a diamond on a spreadsheet easily, but you can put lifestyle there. And lifestyle is where older thieves slip. They cannot resist enjoying it. The day of action comes, and it is not dramatic. Not for you. It is early. It is cold. It is men in vests, checking radios, checking doors, checking that everyone knows which house is which. You do not kick in a door unless you have to. You do not want chaos. You want evidence intact, so you time it. Simultaneous entries. No warnings. No time for phone calls. The kind of coordinated bureaucracy that feels like a net tightening. The first address yields a familiar disappointment. No glittering pile, no mountain of diamonds, just a lived-in home, cluttered, ordinary smelling faintly of fried food and stale air. But then, in a drawer, you find cash. Not millions, not headline money, but enough to make your eyebrows lift. Bundled, hidden. Cash that has no reason to be there except the reason you are thinking. In a shed, you find tools, a drill stand, batteries, bits, the sort of kit that could be innocent if you ignore the concrete residue. You do not ignore the concrete residue. You bag it. You photograph it in place. You label it like your future depends on it, because it does. Another address yields gloves, masks, and more cash. Still not the fantasy hall. But you are not hunting fantasy. You are hunting links, and links are accumulating. Then the unit smells like cold metal and old petrol, the kind of air that never quite warms up. You step in slow, because lockups love hiding needles, blades, and surprises. Your torch beam slides across stacked tires, broken chairs, a fridge that should have been thrown out in 2009. You do not see diamonds. You see the infrastructure of a job, a workbench, a vise bolted down hard, a tangle of extension leads, a battery charger with concrete dust baked into the vents like flour in an oven fan. Congratulations, you have found the place where someone felt safe enough to be messy. The first thing you do is stop everyone from touching anything with bare hands, because the whole point of a lockup is that it is private. Private means habits. Habits mean fingerprints, even from men who think they are careful. You photograph the room exactly as it is. Every cable, every footprint in dust, every smear on the workbench like a thumbprint made of grease. Then you start opening containers, the way you open a story that does not want to be read. A sports bag under the bench gives you a drill bit case. Core bits, big ones, the kind that do not live in a normal home unless you are drilling through walls for a living. You lift one out with gloved hands, and you can feel the weight of it, the blunt confidence. The edge is worn in a pattern the lab will love. Heat scoring, microchips, a life history written in tiny scratches. This is where the tool mark examiner will start smiling, the grim little smile of a person who knows comparison is coming. In a plastic tub, you find rubble, not just dirt, chunks of concrete, pale gray, with embedded aggregate that matches the vault wall like a family resemblance. It is not proof by itself, but it is a bridge, and bridges are what juries walk across. Then, you find the first thing that makes the whole team go quiet, a clear food container The cheap kind you steal from your own kitchen and never get back. Inside it, loose stones, not mounted, not packaged for sale, just sitting there like someone paused mid-thought, mid-greed. Diamonds look underwhelming in a box like that. They always do. They look like hard sugar. They look like the thing you would sweep into a dustpan if you did not know what you were looking at. But you know, and you feel the case tilt towards certainty. You call it in, and you hear your own voice stay flat, professional. Because excitement is the enemy of procedure. Procedure is how you keep what you find. You bag the stones individually because later you will need to explain chain of custody like it is a religion. Where it was, who touched it, when it moved, where it slept overnight, every step documented because defense lawyers live for gaps. There is more. In a drawer, you find small cash bundles folded tight with rubber bands. Not enough to match the headlines, enough to show someone has already started spending, or splitting, or both. You keep searching. Behind a stack of paint tins, there is a plastic bag with watches. In another box, there is jewelry, mixed, tangled, impatiently stored. Not curated, not treasured, just handled. This is where the romantic heist story dies. It is not a gentleman thief placing jewels in velvet. It is men shoving other people's lives into supermarket bags. You have to slow down now, because identifying property is a nightmare with a pulse. Diamonds do not come with names. Cash comes with none at all. And safe deposit boxes are where people put things they do not want photographed. So, you begin building a property picture from scraps. You contact the vault company again, and you tell them you need box holder lists. And you need them yesterday. You need signed statements. You need inventories, even if they are handwritten and incomplete. You need photographs, insurance forms, appraisals, anything. Because the court will not convict on vibes, and victims cannot reclaim what cannot be described. In the meantime, the forensics grind begins. The seized drill bits go to the lab. The drill stand gets swabbed for skin cells. The battery packs get checked for serial numbers, purchase history, and that soft smear of concrete that says, "I was there." A scenes of crime officer kneels by the unit door and lifts a print from the metal frame. It is partial. It is smudged. It is still a gift. Because partial prints become full identities when they belong to men who have been arrested before. And men like these have been arrested before. You step back out of the unit and let the team breathe for a second. Outside, the industrial estate is quiet, indifferent. A gull screams somewhere over a skip. A delivery truck reverses with that beeping sound that feels like a headache. Life continues because it always does. But your phone is already buzzing with the next problem. Now that you have physical evidence, you have to decide how long you keep listening. Because every hour you delay arrests is another hour for the remaining loot to move. And once diamonds get handed to a cutter, they become strangers. Once gold gets melted, it becomes silence. So you meet with the team in a small office that smells like stale biscuits. You lay out what you have: cash, tools, stones, the clubhouse, and the recordings. Their own voices stepping on rakes. This is where you make the decision that feels like moving a chess piece, except the pieces can drive away. You accelerate. You start drafting the arrest plan. Not because you have found everything. You have not. Because you have found enough to stop the bleeding. And you know in your bones that crews like this get twitchy when they sense the air change. They start moving property. They start blaming each other. They start doing late-night drives to bury things in places that feel clever. You want to hit them before clever becomes permanent. But you also know the other truth. You cannot arrest just to feel progress. You arrest to win. So you go back into the covert audio and you listen again with new ears. Now you are not listening for guilt. You already have that. You are listening for where. Where are the remaining stones? Where is the cash? Who is holding what? And in one conversation, one of them mentions a name, not a person, a place, a relative, a girlfriend, a mate with a loft. It is said casually, like it does not matter. That is how the best intelligence arrives, wearing a cheap disguise. You task surveillance to that new address immediately, not to storm it, to watch it, because if the loot is there, it will move when the crew feels pressure. And you are the pressure now, whether they know it or not. The next day, surveillance sees one of the suspects arrive at the address with a bag. Not a huge duffel. I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. Small enough to look like groceries, which is exactly the point. Big bags get remembered. Small bags become invisible, even when they are full of someone else's life. You watch the footage again, and you hate how normal it looks. A man at a front door, a quick glance left and right, a casual handoff. Then he walks away like he dropped off paperwork. Congratulations. You are watching stolen wealth travel by the oldest method on earth, friendship and favors. You do not move yet. Not because you are unsure, because you are trying to catch the moment the bag becomes evidence, not just a bag. So you let surveillance sit on the address. You let them watch who comes and goes. You let them note the car registration numbers, the visitors, the rhythm of the day. Because if this is a stash point, you will see the same faces return, and if it is not a stash point, you will see the bag leave again. Either way, movement gives you leverage. Inside your head, the case starts splitting into two clocks. One clock is the prosecution clock, slow and methodical. The other is the loot clock, fast and cruel. Loot does not wait for paperwork. Loot moves the moment it senses attention. You listen back to the covert audio and you hear the pressure building in their voices. Not panic, not yet. More like irritation. The way people sound when they cannot find their keys. They talk about who has what. They talk about who is holding money. They talk about someone being greedy, someone being stupid, someone being too loud. A crew that trusts each other does not keep score out loud. A crew that trusts each other does not argue about percentages. And when older men start arguing, they start making mistakes to prove a point. One of them says something that lands heavy. He mentions a safe, not the vault safe, his own. He says it like a punchline, like a man bragging about a new television. That is your bridge, because safes have serial numbers and receipts and delivery records. Safes also have weight, and weight requires vehicles. So you pivot again, from listening to building. You start stacking small facts into a warrant shape. You pull vehicle sightings near each suspect's home. You pull petrol station camera footage because big jobs drink fuel. You pull purchase histories where you can, cash withdrawals, unusual spending, and you ask a simple question that keeps winning cases. What did they need right after the job that they did not need before? A storage unit, a new set of tools, a new phone, a new safe, a new van, a sudden holiday, because criminals always forget the first rule: do not celebrate. Meanwhile, the vault company is collapsing under the administrative weight. Box holders want answers, and you cannot give them numbers yet. Some of them are calm in the way that scares you. Some of them are loud, accusing, convinced you are hiding information. Some of them do not want to speak in a police station at all. They want a quiet corner, a private chat, a promise that their names stay out of it. And that is the specific ugliness of safe deposit crime. People keep things in boxes because they do not want the world involved. Now the world is involved, and it is wearing gloves and writing everything down. You set up a process because that is all you can do. A property team, a database, a triage system for claims. You ask for any proof, any photograph, any appraisal, any insurance schedule. You explain gently that without identifiers, you cannot return what you recover. They look at you like you are insulting them. How do you prove a diamond is yours when it has been in a box for 20 years? How do you prove a gold watch is yours when it was a gift and the receipt died a decade ago? Congratulations, you are now doing grief work with spreadsheets. Back at the lockup, you keep processing. Every tool gets tagged. Every surface gets swabbed. Every battery pack gets its serial checked against any purchase records. The lab starts telling you things that sound small, but are not. Concrete dust from the drill stand matches the breach material profile. Not perfectly, because nothing is perfect in the real world, but close enough to make an expert say, these particles are consistent. Consistent is a boring word that destroys alibis. Tool mark comparison begins too. The lab takes silicone casts from the vault breach. They take microscopic images of the cut patterns. Then they look at the seized core bits like they are reading a diary. And slowly, the conclusion hardens. A specific bit with a specific wear pattern creates a specific score. It is not magic. It is metallurgy and friction and the fact that tools develop personalities. A screwdriver becomes your screwdriver by the tiny nicks you put in it. A drill bit becomes your drill bit by the walls it chewed through. You get the preliminary result and you feel your shoulders loosen. Not relief exactly, more like confirmation that your instincts still work. Now you have a triangle. The voices on the recordings, the phones in the area, the tools that match the wall. Triangles hold up better than stories. But you still have a problem. You do not have the full haul. And you already know you never will, unless you move fast. So the strategy meeting changes tone. Less patience, more urgency. You start planning coordinated arrests, not just searches. Because arrest stops movement, at least temporarily. It freezes the crew in place, separates them, prevents the quick phone calls that turn evidence into ash. You pick your moment carefully. Early morning, when people are slow, when doors open half asleep, you coordinate entry teams, interview teams, transport, exhibit officers. You line up enough bodies to hit multiple addresses at once, because if you take one, the others run. Old burglars may have bad knees, but they can still disappear. And if they cannot disappear, they can still flush phones, hide jewelry, handbags over fences. You also line up specialists, because this is not just an arrest. This is an evidence harvest. Digital devices, documents, cash, jewelry, storage keys, any scrap that tells you where the rest went. You brief the teams with the kind of calm that only exists before chaos. You show them photographs of suspects. You show them vehicle descriptions. You remind them that older does not mean harmless. Older means experienced. Older means they have been handcuffed before, and they know what questions are coming. On the morning of the operation, you are awake before your alarm. You always are on days like this. The city is dark, damp, indifferent. Streetlights reflect in puddles like cheap jewelry. You sit in a car with your team, radio low, coffee cooling in the cup holder. You think about the vault again, that empty metal grid. You think about the box holders and the way their hands shook when they tried to describe what they kept. You tell yourself this is about evidence, not vengeance. But you are not a robot. You want to take something back from the men who think they can carve a hole in London and walk away. The call comes in, quiet and clipped. Teams are in position. Doors are about to open. Then it happens all at once, like a net tightening. A knock, a forced entry, a shouted name, a stunned face in a hallway. A man in his 60s, maybe older, standing in slippers, blinking at officers like he is offended by the early hour. That offended look is always the same. How dare you treat me like the kind of person who robs vaults? Congratulations, you have met the self-respect of a career criminal. They caution him. They handcuff him. He complains about his shoulder. He asks what this is about, like he has no idea. You let him talk. You let him build the first layer of denial, because denial is useful when you can break it later. At another address, another suspect is detained. He is calmer, too calm, trying to control the room with politeness. He asks if he can put the kettle on. He tries to chat with officers about football. He is the type who believes charm is a shield. Charm is not evidence, but it is a habit, and habits crack when pressure rises. At a third address, the entry team finds a phone on the move. A suspect is trying to grab it from a bedside table, trying to tap it, maybe to delete messages, maybe to call someone. His hand freezes when they shout. That moment matters because it shows intent. People do not reach for phones like that when they have nothing to hide. The phone goes into a sealed bag, powered down, tagged. Because digital evidence is a fragile animal, you do not want it changing, sinking, wiping itself in the background. You want it frozen, preserved, later extracted by people who speak its language. Other teams are still searching while arrests happen. Drawers open, carpets lift, loft hatches drop down, dust raining like old snow. You find small pockets of cash wrapped and tucked. You find packaging, jiffy bags, bubble wrap, the kind used to transport small valuables. You find cheap gloves, disposable masks, a hard hat in a cupboard. Not proof by itself, but again, it is infrastructure. It is the wardrobe of men pretending to be workers. Then, you get the call you wanted. A safe is located in one of the properties. Not a big bank vault, Just a heavy domestic safe, bolted to the floor. It is exactly the kind of thing a man buys when he suddenly has something worth hiding. You photograph it in place. You do not rush to open it like a child on a birthday. You treat it like a container of problems, because opening safes destroys evidence if you do it wrong. Tool marks matter. Fingerprints matter. The way it is bolted down matters. You bring in a safe tech and you do it properly, slow and documented. Inside, there is more cash and small parcels wrapped in tissue. When you unwrap one, you see jewelry and a watch with a distinctive face. It is not yours, not theirs, but now it is on your evidence table. And you know some victim, somewhere, is going to recognize it like a punch to the throat. The suspects are transported, separated, each in their own little bubble of consequences. You do not let them sit together. You do not let them share stories. You want each man alone with his own decisions, because conspiracies survive on group confidence. Separate them, and confidence leaks out. Now comes the part the public never imagines. Interview planning. Not shouting, not slamming tables, not dramatic confessions. Just you, a recording device, a caution, and hours of slow dismantling. You enter the interview room with a folder that feels too heavy. Not because paper weighs much, because the folder contains the story he wishes you did not have. He sits across from you, older, lined face, eyes that try to look bored. He asks again what this is about, like he is playing a role he rehearsed. You tell him, calmly, conspiracy to commit burglary. You let the words sit in the air. He snorts like it is ridiculous. He says he has not been near Hatton Garden. He says he was at home over Easter, watching television, eating, resting. He says he is too old for that kind of thing. Old is the new alibi, apparently. You let him finish. You let him hang his story on small nails. Then you start tapping those nails. You ask about his phone. He says he does not know. He says maybe someone borrowed it. You ask who. He cannot recall. Memory always gets worse when accountability arrives. You ask about the van sightings near Hatton Garden. He says he does not drive vans. You show him a still image, grainy but suggestive. He squints, dismisses it. Could be anyone, he says. And that is true if you only have one still, but you do not. You have a timeline, a cluster, a pattern. You ask about the lockup. He says he has never heard of it. You mention the industrial estate. He smiles, thin, like you are fishing. So you stop fishing and you start placing bait in front of him. You play a short clip of audio. Not the whole thing. Not yet. Just his voice, saying a specific detail about drilling. A detail not in the news. He goes very still. Just for a second. Congratulations. You have found the place where his performance slips. He tries to pivot. He says, voices can be mistaken. He says, recording can be manipulated. People say all sorts of things when they hear themselves trapped. You do not argue. You do not need to. You just document his denial. Because a denial is a marker. It is a stake in the ground you can later show the jury. He denied it before he heard the rest. He denied it before he saw the tools. He denied it before you showed him his phone movement. Then you move to the next suspect in the next room with the next version of the same story. He claims he was nowhere near central London. He claims his knees would never allow it. He claims He is being harassed because of his past. And there it is, the truth hiding in the complaint. Because yes, he has a past, and past is not proof, but it is context. It is why his fingerprints are in the system. It is why his DNA might match a swab. It is why his name appeared in intelligence. When the phone pings clustered, the third suspect is different. He talks more. He complains about the others. He hints at grudges. He tries to position himself as minor, peripheral, not really involved. And that is the interview gift. Not a confession, but a hierarchy. If he is minor, who is major? If he was peripheral, where was the center? You keep your tone soft. You let him talk himself tired, because tired people fill silence with truth. He mentions money, vaguely. He mentions that everyone is blaming everyone. He says something like, "They did not even split it right." You ask, "Who is they?" He shuts down, realizes what he did. But the phrase is recorded now. It exists. And it shows knowledge of the internal world of the crew. In between interviews, you handle exhibits like they are fragile lies. Every piece of cash counted, photographed, bagged. Every stone cataloged, examined, sealed. You know the defense will say, "Prove this came from the vault. Prove these are the same diamonds." And you know, in your cynical little heart, that some of them will never be provable. Because diamonds are not serialized like banknotes. Because jewelry can be generic. Because some victims kept no records. So you start building proof the only way you can. Circumstantial, cumulative, dense, concrete dust on the drill, tool marks matching the breach, cell site data, placing devices in the area, CCTV showing movement and vehicles, covert audio indicating specific knowledge, and then property recovery that aligns with the crime window, a pile of threads braided into rope. You also confront them selectively with what you have. Not everything. Never everything. You keep something back, always. Because when you show your whole hand, you lose the chance to catch them lying again. You show one suspect a photograph of the core drill bits. He says he has never seen them. You ask how his DNA ends up on the case then. He looks at you like you just spoke a foreign language. You are not supposed to have DNA, he thinks. That is the moment you see it, the gap between their confidence and reality. They planned the entry, the drilling, the timing. They did not plan the modern evidence ecosystem. They did not plan the way everything records, quietly. And they definitely did not plan their own mouths. One of them tries to negotiate. He asks what happens if he helps. He asks what happens if he tells you where something is. You do not promise anything you cannot deliver. You tell him the truth. The court considers cooperation. The prosecution considers it. But nothing is guaranteed. He looks disappointed because he wanted a deal like in television. Television is generous with deals. Real life is stingy. Still, the question alone tells you something. He knows there is more out there. He is afraid the others will blame him. He is thinking about self-preservation. And self-preservation is a lever you can pull. While interviews continue, financial investigators start their own slow siege. They look at bank accounts. They look at benefit claims, pensions, declared income. Then they look at purchases after the heist. It is never as dramatic as a sports car. More often, It is debt repayments, a new kitchen, a holiday booked, cash used in ways that do not match a man who claims he is broke. Older criminals often do not splurge. They patch their lives. They pay off what has been haunting them. They help family. They think that makes it invisible. It does not. It makes it traceable. Because normal people cannot pay 6 months' rent in cash and call it nothing. The case file thickens in a way you can almost feel. Statements from box holders, statements from security staff, technical reports from engineers, forensic reports from labs, transcripts of covert audio, carefully handled, carefully authorized, and in the middle of it all, the simple, ugly photograph, the hole in the wall. It remains the anchor, the thing the jury will understand in their bones. Someone made that hole. Someone had the time. Someone felt safe enough to do it. Now you have to show that the someones in custody are the same someones who did that. The prosecution team starts shaping it into a narrative. Not a flashy one, a clean one. Conspiracy, planning, execution, profit, concealment. They assign roles as best they can. One man the planner, coordinating. One man the tool operator, the hands. One man the driver. One man the one who talks too much. You already know roles are not always neat. Men like this swap tasks when their backs hurt. They help each other carry gear. They all feel entitled to credit. And entitlement is loud in court because it makes men contradict each other on the stand. It also makes them careless in custody because they cannot stop explaining themselves. You move from interview rooms to charging decisions, and it feels like walking from a storm into a spreadsheet. You sit with prosecutors, and you learn again that certainty is not the same as proof. You think you have them, and then a lawyer asks a simple question. Can you place this man inside the vault, beyond reasonable doubt? You answer with the rope you built, strand by strand. Phones in the area, van on camera, tools with dust, bits that match marks, audio that shows knowledge nobody should have, property that appears in their orbit. You watch the prosecutor nod, not impressed, just satisfied, because this is not about genius. It is about weight. Enough weight stacked carefully, and the story does not tip over. Still, you hit the first courtroom reality check before you ever see a jury. Disclosure. Schedules? Transcripts? Exhibit lists? If you have never watched a major case die on paperwork, congratulations. You get to watch grown adults argue over labeling, while stolen lives sit in bags. You spend nights checking that every audio clip is logged right. You check that every warrant is justified on paper. You check that every seizure has a continuity statement, because the defense will not attack the hole in the wall. They will attack you and your process and your tired human hands. You can feel it coming like rain in your knees. The suspects, meanwhile, settle into their chosen coping mechanisms. One gets indignant, one gets quiet and calculating. One keeps asking to speak to you again, like he is shopping for a better outcome. You do not give him one. You do not bargain with people who still think they deserve a discount. But you listen, because listening costs you nothing, and sometimes buys you location. He tells you carefully that he did not keep anything. He tells you the others took the best. He tells you with offended dignity that he only helped with lifting. Only helped. As if carrying a drill into a vault is community service. You ask him where the remaining property went. He says he does not know. Then he says a name and catches himself too late. A cousin, a friend, someone who owes someone. You write it down and you do not look excited. You thank him like you are taking a restaurant reservation. Because if he sees the hook, he stops biting. That new lead turns into another day of warrants, another day of patient watching. You send a small team to look at the cousin's address, not crashing through the door, just sitting quietly, letting time do what time does. A man comes out with a bin bag. He drops it, then thinks better and pulls it back inside. Nothing dramatic, just a human moment that screams, "I am hiding something." You do not jump on a bin bag, not yet. You build. You find out the cousin recently rented a small storage space, a clean little unit with a keypad in a facility that smells like bleach and cardboard. You get the paperwork, you get the entry logs, a code used late at night, more than once, right after the heist. Congratulations, you have found a modern version of burying treasure. You obtain the authority, and you open the unit with a witness and a camera. Inside, there is no glittering mountain. There are boxes, there are suitcases, there are plastic tubs. It looks like someone moved house. Badly. You open the first suitcase and find documents, old passports, some not matching the face that should own them. Then you open the second, and you see jewelry in pouches and loose stones in packets. Not enough, not what the headlines promised, but enough to make you breathe out slowly through your nose. Because this proves something important. The loot is distributed. The loot is compartmentalized, and that means recovery will be partial, and arguments will be endless. You seize what you can, and you start the long, ugly process of linking it back. You ask victims to come in, one by one, and describe what is missing. You watch them struggle with their own memories. They do not know carats and clarity grades. They know that it was their mother's ring. They know the scratch on the clasp. They know the way the watch felt heavy in the palm. You do your best to translate emotion into identifiers, metal type, hallmarks, engravings, serial numbers, if anyone was wise enough to keep them. Photographs from anniversaries where the necklace happened to be visible. A blurry holiday picture that suddenly becomes evidence. Congratulations, you are now investigating old family albums. It is exhausting, and it matters. Because in court, ownership is not a vibe. It is a fact you can show on paper with a signature at the bottom. And if you cannot show it, you cannot return it. That is the part nobody puts in the movie. The recovery room. Fluorescent lights, tables covered with sealed bags, victims sitting with clipboards, hands shaking, trying to be precise while their stomach turns. You stand at the edge of it, and you feel the case shift again. The suspects become less interesting. The system becomes the villain, slow and procedural, and you become the guide, telling people why the process has to be slow, even when it feels cruel. Because if you rush and misattribute a ring, you create a second victim. Now the forensic results firm up, and the story tightens around the crew. The toolmark examiner produces a report that reads like a boring death sentence. Microscopic striations, individual characteristics, consistency between the seized bit and the vault damage. Translated into human, the drill bit has the same bite marks as the wall. It is like matching a key to a lock except the key is violence made of steel. The concrete analysis also comes back with a dull, satisfying phrase, indistinguishable within expected variation, meaning the dust in the lockup is the same recipe as the vault to a degree that matters. You do not need perfection. You need a credible expert explaining it to 12 tired strangers. Digital forensics begins pulling secrets out of phones, and it feels like watching someone gut a fish. Text messages, call logs, location artifacts, photos. Not selfies of the crime. These men are not that kind of stupid. But photos of bags of cash, photos of a watch on a kitchen counter, photos taken to brag to one person, privately because ego needs a witness. And then the little accidents. A picture taken in a room with a reflection that shows more than intended. A screenshot of a map. A note app list of numbers. They thought they were old school. Their pockets disagree. But even with all of this, you keep running into the same missing shadow. The unrecovered bulk. The part of the haul that turned into rumor. People talk about tens of millions because people love round numbers and big feelings. In your evidence room, you have something less romantic. You have pockets, fragments, proof of theft, and proof of distribution, and proof that some of it is gone. The prosecution has to thread that needle. They cannot oversell what they cannot prove, so they build the case around what is undeniable. The break-in, the conspiracy, the presence, the tools, the admissions, and enough recovered property to show this was not a fantasy. You watch how the language changes as it moves toward trial. Less heist, more burglary. Less ingenious, more methodical. Less Ocean's 11, more men with a drill and a calendar. The defendants make their choices as the trial approaches. Some plead guilty because they can count, and their lawyers have explained the math. Some plead not guilty because pride is heavier than evidence. And some try to plead guilty while minimizing because they still want to be the hero of their own story. You sit through pre-trial hearings where lawyers argue about the covert audio, about what can be played and how, about whether the authorizations were properly obtained. This is the part where cases can bleed out. If your paperwork has a single hole, you check again and again. You remember that you are not just fighting burglars, you are fighting time and bureaucracy and human error. In the background, the city keeps mythologizing. Newspapers call them the bad grandpas. People laugh because the suspects are old, and it feels safer to laugh. Old men in hoodies. Old men with hearing aids. Old men climbing into a van like it hurts. The public loves the idea that this is harmless. You do not. You have seen the victims. You have heard the way an older jeweler's voice cracks when he says, "My stock was in there." You have watched a woman try not to cry while she describes her father's cufflinks. Harmless is a word people use when they do not want to think too hard. Then court begins, and everything becomes theater, whether you like it or not. The courtroom is warm and dry and smells faintly of paper and old carpet. You sit behind counsel, watching the jury file in. 12 people who did not plan to be here. 12 people who still think crime is dramatic until it is their week. The prosecution opens with the simple picture: a secure vault, a holiday weekend, a hole cut through concrete, a plan that relied on silence. Then they start laying the rope on the floor, strand by strand. CCTV, a van in the right place, cell site data, a chart that looks like a conspiracy board, but is just math. The defendants sit there, some looking bored, some looking offended, some looking like they are finally tired. The defense, predictably, tries to fracture everything. Cell site data is not precise, they say. Voices can be mistaken, tools can be owned by anyone. A lockup can be used by friends, cash can be from savings. You listen, and you feel the cynical part of you nod, because they are not wrong in isolation. One strand can be questioned. That is why you built rope. Then the covert audio arrives, and the room changes. Not because it is dramatic, because it is mundane. The voices are relaxed. They talk like men who believe they are among friends. They mention details that are not public. They complain about drilling. They complain about alarms. They complain about splitting money. They complain about each other. And suddenly, the jury is not listening to lawyers anymore. They are listening to men who cannot stop telling on themselves. You watch faces in the jury box tighten, not with excitement, with recognition, because everyone knows that tone, the tone of people doing something wrong and treating it like a normal day. It is unsettling in a way blood is not. The tool mark expert takes the stand next, and you can see the jury brace for boredom. Then the expert does the one thing experts have to do. They translate. They take microscope images, and they show how a bit leaves a pattern. They explain how wear creates uniqueness. They point to the match points. They do not claim miracles. They claim consistency. And consistency is enough when it sits beside everything else. A defense lawyer tries to make it sound like guesswork. The expert stays calm. Calm is its own weapon. You realize, again, that good forensic testimony is like good narration. Slow, clear, no drama, just a steady hand leading someone through a dark room. The property evidence comes in, and you feel the atmosphere turn grim, because this is where the victims re-enter the story. A watch is shown. A victim identifies it by a tiny engraving. A ring is shown. A woman recognizes a chip on a stone, and her eyes fill, and she looks down fast, as if embarrassed. No one laughs now. No one calls anyone a grandpa. The defense tries to suggest these could be similar items. Then the victim produces an old photograph, a Christmas dinner, a hand visible, the ring visible, and that photograph, taken without intent, becomes a door closing on denial. Congratulations, you are watching ordinary life become a witness. The trial, like all trials, is longer than anyone wants. There are days of technical evidence. There are days of arguments over what a word in a transcript means. There are moments where the jury looks like they are drifting. You cannot blame them. This is not a movie. This is work. And the real trick, the grim trick, is that the thieves did work too. They scheduled. They brought equipment. They relied on quiet. They exploited procedure. You can see how the jury wrestles with that. A part of them wants to be impressed. Then they remember the people sitting in the gallery, listening to their lives being discussed, like inventory. You watch the defendants when evidence lands hard. One of them shakes his head, slowly, as if the prosecution is being unreasonable. One of them stares at the table, jaw grinding. One of them tries to look amused, but his knee bounces under the desk because bodies always confess what faces deny. When it comes time for verdicts, you do not feel triumph. You feel fatigue. Because verdicts do not return heirlooms. They do not unmelt gold. They do not uncut stones. They do not remove the 6 sense of violation from the victims. Still, guilt is established, and that matters even if it is not enough. Sentencing follows, and the judge speaks about planning, about breach of trust, about impact. Some of the men receive years, not decades, because age and health and the realities of sentencing guidelines exist. The public reads the numbers and either cheers or shrugs or jokes. You sit with the numbers and think about arithmetic. How many nights in prison equals a lifetime of stolen family history? It is not a fair equation. It never is. And just when the public thinks the story is done, you step into the part that never makes headlines. The proceeds of crime work, the financial investigation, the cold, methodical chase for benefit, because a prison sentence without recovery is just punishment. Recovery is the only part that looks like repair, and repair is what victims actually want. Even if they say they want revenge, you begin tracing cash and assets, not like a movie, not with dramatic bank hackers, with requests, with subpoenas, with account statements and property records. You look for unexplained deposits. You look for cash purchases. You look for new safes, new storage units, new vehicles. You look at relatives too, carefully, because families are where criminals hide things. Not always out of malice, sometimes out of loyalty, sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes because they were told it was inheritance. Congratulations, you are now investigating excuses. You see patterns. Small amounts of cash given to a partner, a debt cleared, a kitchen renovation that suddenly seems too expensive, a holiday booked in cash, nothing fancy, just a week of pretending you earned it. Older criminals do not always buy sports cars. They buy relief. Relief is still traceable. You also see the other pattern, the one you hate more. The missing bulk that never becomes a bank deposit. The part of the haul that likely moved through contacts, into the trade, into anonymity. Diamonds can be recut. Gold can be melted. Watches can be stripped for parts. Even paperwork can be burned. You chase what you can and you accept what you cannot because you have to. But you do not stop trying, because sometimes recovery comes from the least romantic place. A man's loft, a garage wall, a biscuit tin under a bed, a bag forgotten because someone got sick or arrested, or simply old. Time is the enemy and also the ally, depending on whose body fails first. The victim process continues, and it is brutal in its own quiet way. You call people in and you show them tables of items. They point and you document. They hesitate and you reassure. You explain that claiming something wrongly is a crime too. Most of them do not need the warning. They look at the items like they are touching grief. Some people cannot even come in. They send a son, a daughter, someone younger to handle it, because they cannot bear the sight. One man, a jeweler, stands over a tray of recovered stones and starts doing mental calculation. Not value, not profit, just absence. He sees what is there, and he sees what is missing, and his shoulders drop. He tells you, quietly, that the missing portion will never come back. He has been in the trade too long to believe in happy endings. You do not argue. You have been in policing too long to argue, but you still take his statement and you still ask for identifying marks because sometimes, years later, something surfaces. A stone with a laser inscription, a watch with a serial, a piece of jewelry pawned by someone too stupid to file it. I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request through an official dealer because the cleverest laundering is the kind that looks like Tuesday. You learn the hard way that recovery is not a raid. Recovery is a calendar and a phone list and a lot of people saying, I will check my drawers. You keep the case technically alive even after the convictions land because property does not care about verdicts. Property sits wherever it was last put, waiting for a human to make a mistake. So you keep running the quiet tactics. You circulate descriptions to pawnbrokers and jewelers, not the tabloids. You brief specialists and you remind them what matters. Hallmarks, serials, engravings, and any stone with a laser mark. You also do the unglamorous thing. You revisit the evidence that already bored everyone. The seized phones, the call data, the storage unit access logs, because time changes how data looks. A number that meant nothing during the rush can mean everything later. Once you know who owns it, digital examiners pull out deleted messages, fragments, and location traces. Not magic, just the fact that most people never truly erase anything. One handset gives you a photo of a kitchen table, taken for no good reason. In the corner of the frame, half out of focus, is a pile of small packets, the kind used for stones. The timestamp sits right after the heist window, like a smug little confession. You match the background to a suspect address by radiator shape and counter pattern. Congratulations, you are now identifying crime scenes by kitchen tile. That photo becomes a new warrant angle, even if you already searched the place, because a search is not a spell. People hide things again in different places after you leave. The follow-up search does not find a treasure chest. It finds something more real. A void behind a skirting board, patched badly, like a man did it in a hurry. Inside is a small pouch, and inside that, a handful of stones. Not the big ones, not the headline makers. The leftovers, the ones nobody could fence easily, or the ones somebody forgot. You bag them, log them, and add them to the property database like another drop in a bucket. Every recovered item is two feelings at once. Relief because something came back. Disgust because it proves how much did not. Then there is the financial side, the part that feels like you are arguing with smoke. Proceeds of crime hearings, asset restraint, account freezes. The court wants numbers, and criminals prefer fog. You sit with financial investigators and watch them build the money map. Cash withdrawals, cash spending, payments that do not fit the declared life. You see the same pattern again and again. Small bundles moving through family. A granddaughter gets help with rent. A partner suddenly has a new boiler. A cousin pays off a car. Everyone says it was savings. Everyone says it was a gift. Everyone says, do not drag me into this. Congratulations! You are learning how theft gets renamed into generosity. Some assets get seized because the paperwork is clean enough to grab. A vehicle, a bit of cash, a few stored items, things you can point to, but you cannot seize what is already turned into anonymous stones. You cannot seize what has been melted into plain gold, and the more you learn about the trade routes, the worse the arithmetic feels. Diamonds do not need passports. They do not trigger alarms at borders. They can cross a continent in a pocket, and no one knows they were ever stolen. You push anyway, because pushing is the job. You speak to dealers quietly with the tone that says, "Help yourself by helping me." Most are careful. Some are genuinely cooperative because stolen goods poison their world too. And a few, a very few, hand you something useful. A rumor about a batch of stones moved cheap, too fast, by an older contact. A name gets mentioned, not a suspect, a middleman. The kind of man who never drills the wall. He just opens the door afterward. You chase him through interviews and records, and he denies like he breathes. But you are not asking for a confession. You are asking for friction, because friction creates mistakes. You get a warrant for his premises, and you find nothing dramatic, just paperwork that should not exist. A small note with weights and values written in the lazy shorthand of a man who does this too often. Not enough to charge him cleanly on its own. Enough to show how the heist ended, not with a celebration, but with accounting. You step back and look at what the case has become. Not the hole in the wall anymore. A long tale of little deceptions and half-recovered lives, and a system trying to be fair with imperfect proof. Some victims get items back, and you watch them hold a ring like it might vanish again. Others get nothing back, and their faces settle into that quiet, permanent anger. They ask you, over and over, where the rest is. You give them the only answer that is honest. It is either hidden, sold, or changed into something unrecognizable. None of those answers feel like justice, and you can see that land on them like weight. A few of them blame the vault company more than the thieves, because the thieves are predictable. Greed, planning, a holiday gap, and a lazy assumption that no one will check. But the vault was supposed to be the boring part of their lives. Boring is what people pay for. And the bitter lesson, the one you keep writing into reports, is that security fails in the places everyone stops looking. A vibration alarm that cried wolf too often. A policy that treated holidays like downtime. A response protocol built for convenience, not for the night someone brings an industrial drill. You work with partners to tighten those procedures after the fact. Better escalation, better physical barriers, better real-time response. And you hate the truth that sits underneath all of it. Most improvements are written in the ink of someone else's loss. Months go by, and the case quiets down in public. The jokes dry up, the headlines move on, but you keep getting calls, the slow drip of aftermath. A pawnbroker reports a watch with a serial that pings your list. A jeweler sees a stone with a laser inscription and gets nervous and does the right thing. Each time, you feel that old case file stir. Not alive, not dead, just waiting. You recover a few more items that way, and each recovery is a small win with a long shadow. Because every time you return a piece, you confirm the rest is still out there somewhere. Then, one evening, you sit with a detective who is newer than you, still capable of optimism. He asks the question like it is a normal question. Do you think they buried any of it? You picture a spade, a garden, an old man's hands shaking as he digs. You picture the fantasy of treasure wrapped in plastic, hidden under a shed, and you give him the tired answer. Some of it might be buried. Some of it might be in a loft above a child's bedroom. Some of it might be in a drawer that gets opened once a year when someone feels brave. Or it might be long gone, recut, renamed, and sold with a smile. You cannot know which, and not knowing is the part that keeps cases like this awake at night. In the end, the investigation is marked as solved because the crew was convicted. The wall was matched to the tools. The voices were matched to the men. The timeline was pinned down hard enough to hold in court. That is the official ending. But you and I both know official endings are just paperwork. The real ending is the one the victims live with. A safe deposit box that will never feel like a fortress again. A holiday weekend that now tastes like concrete dust and panic. A trust that got drilled through as cleanly as that wall. You lock the file away and you tell yourself you did what the job allows. You caught the men. You took back what you could. You tightened the net for the next crew who thinks time and routine are the same as permission. Then you go home and you catch yourself looking at your own drawers differently. Because crime like this does not just steal jewelry, it steals the assumption that secure means untouched. And somewhere in London, in a place that looks painfully ordinary, something small and valuable is still waiting to be recognized.